everyone. We would like to present to you about the 5-second rule. I'm Caroline.
I'm Signe.
And I'm Mette.
This science fair is about the 5-second rule. If you don't yet know the 5-second rule, it's actually more of a theory. The theory claims that if any food item is dropped on the floor or elsewhere, it can be picked up within 5 seconds and eaten. We think a lot of people use it because it's very simple, there's not that much to it, and because we don't want to waste our food. We chose this subject because we all use the rule sometimes. Many people know the rule, but yet no one has ever tried it and seen if it was actually valid. So we wanted to find out more about bacterial and fungal infections, and we would also try to reduce the chance of being infected.
Yeah, so before starting our experiment, we had some ideas and theories about what the end result of our experiment would be. So we decided to write them down so we could compare them to the actual results after we've done the experiments and see what we had learned. So I'm going to tell you about 2 theories that we had before we started the experiment. So the first one is that when you drop the food on the floor, the dirt and the bacteria and the fungi that's on the floor will catch on to the food and contaminate it so it's not edible anymore. And so the next theory is that more moisturous food will kind of get easier and more contaminated than drier food because it has moist in it, so it kind of sucks in the dirt so that it's easier contaminated. But of course we didn't have any data yet, so we wanted to make an experiment to try and prove ourselves right and wrong. So we made an experiment with 6 different types of food, and they're shown here on the display board. Maybe you can see it. We used an apple, an open sandwich, a lollipop, some bread, some potato chips, and some gum. And I'm just gonna use the potato chips as an example to explain how we did the experiment. So we took 2 potato chips, because in every experiment you want to experiment with the same food. So you have an experiment with the potato chip that has been dropped on the floor and the one that hasn't, so that you can compare them and see if there's any difference. And so we dropped one of the potato chips on the floor. We call that the dirty one, and the other one the clean one. And then we put them in. This is agar. This is like a jelly-like or gooey substance that's really good for growing bacteria and fungi in. And then we put it on. Then we put the potato chips in 2 separate plates with agar. Sorry. And then we waited 4 days, so it had plenty of time to grow good results for us. And we made sure that it was in a constant temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, so the bacteria and fungi wouldn't die because it was too hot or too cold. And we have some pictures of the place afterwards. Is everything okay? No.
Yeah, I think it comes.
Technical difficulties. Okay, yeah. So these were the plates after the 4 days had passed, and we could have brought them here, but as you can see, they were pretty gross, and it wouldn't be very sanitary, and it kind of smelled, so we didn't want to put you through that. It may be like a bit hard to see on this picture. There's actually a big difference between the dirty and the clean plates. There was a lot more growth in the dirty plates, which shows us that the food that had been dropped on the floor was much more dirty and filled with bacteria and fungi than the clean ones. But we also wanted to know what kind of bacteria and fungi we had actually grown in these plates. So, because if you know that, you can also find out what kind of illnesses or diseases you might get if you eat food off the ground. So we put the food under, or the samples here under a microscope, and Caroline will tell you more about what we found.
So, what we had to do were we had to look at the pictures, and then we had to focus on the shape of the bacteria and yeast. And if you kind of look at the board here, I have some pictures of the experiments. Here we have some great examples of yeasts here, and that is actually budding yeast, the thing you see over here. We know that by the oval shape, as you can see over here at AD, that's apple 30. Over here at LDD1, which is lollipop dirty dry one, they are stinging to each other, and that makes it a bit more difficult to see. However, we found out. These pictures show heifer. Heifer can be identified by the fact that they are longer and they have a branch-like figure. You can see that over here at gum 32. These show us that that could be possible that there are two yeasts in one example. Here they have both budding yeast, as I told you about before, but they also have a thing called pseudoheifer. Pseudoheifer can be identified by the fact that they're longer and they don't really have branch-like figures. However, you may think that over here I can see that they have branches, but no, they're just crushing each other. Here we show an example of Fusarium. Fusarium looks a bit like pseudoheifer. However, over here you can see in the faded ones that they have some stripes that show us that this is Fusarium. Until now, all I've been talking about is yeast, but these shows us some bacteria. The small dots you see everywhere here is actually a bacteria called coccus, and however, while it sounds like a fruit, it's actually a bacteria. And over here, as you see some small stripes and all, that's just dust cells and not anything dangerous. These two were pictures of the bread we dropped, and they didn't even take up any bacteria or yeast. The blue things you see here is actually just big sugar molecules, and the bubbles you see is just bread. Lollipop Dirty Wet were the only ones who caught both bacteria and yeast. That is a pretty special thing because normally you either have bacteria or yeast because the yeast will eat all of the nutrition and then the bacteria will die due to the lack of this nutrition. I'm also going to talk about a thing called Candida. Candida is a fungus which is a form of yeast, and a very small amount of it lives in our mouth and intestines. Its main job is helping with digestion and nutrition absorption. But when it's overproduced, it can break down the wall of the intestine and penetrate the bloodstream and may release toxic byproducts into your body and causing leaky gut and candida infections. This can lead to many different health problems from digestive issues to depression. Candida albicans is the most common one and therefore, in our opinion, the most important one, so that was the one we choose to focus on. Candida albicans can cause oral thrush, which is a white rash, or it can cause monoliasis, which is a creamy white substance that covers the mucous membrane of the mouth. If you have a gentle soul, then you may live away. Monoliasis or oral thrush looks like this. And some parents actually let the baby drop the nuki and then just give it back. But you have to wash it or else this could happen to your baby's mouth. Vulvovaginal monoliasis could cause itching and cheese appearing in vaginal discharge. It occurs in females who takes a broad use of antibiotic and take contraceptive pills and are under pregnancy. It could also cause a rash in the skin folds, diaper rash, and paronychia of the nails with the thickening the nails, and you may lose them. Of course, this is just some extreme cases we are showing you, but we just wanted to show you how bad it could go.
So overall, the experiment went great, and you could see a lot of difference between the clean and the dirty dishes. The bread, for an example, was not so affected in the result. The open sandwich, on the other hand, turned out the best or worst. Well, it gave two kinds of fungi, budding yeast and pseudohyphae, that can potentially turn into some kind of infection. The amount of this fungi is essential. We also found out that moisturized food pick up more bacteria and or fungi than dry. Chewing gum don't pick up much bacteria or fungi because of the small surface area.
Yeah, so our results from our experiment kind of went hand in hand with our hypothesis from earlier. And but there was one thing that kind of surprised us again with the bread experiment, where there was barely any difference between the dirty and the clean experiment. But we think this is kind of because of our previous theory where the moisture food pick up more dirt from the ground. But this also shows us that that it's very different how dangerous it is to eat food off the ground depending on what kind of food it is. But generally, we just advise that you don't eat food off the ground and be cautious with what you put in your mouth.
In the future, we will not be using the 5-second rule because it's bad for our body and our system, and you can get all these kind of infections. And to be clear, these are just a few of many. And if we should do the experiment again, we would use other kinds of food just to see if it was our food choices who made so many of them with fungi instead of bacteria. And we would also try it on another surface area, maybe try the difference between clean and dirty floor, or try it outside. So again, we don't recommend to use this rule.
We would like to thank everyone in this room for quietly listening to us, and we would like to thank all of the teachers who gave us time to make this possible. Thank you all for listening to our presentation.